Hi everyone. Today is Sunday, April 24th, 2022. I'm Crystal Dawn Hill, and I'm here to do part 2 of a video that I just recorded. I haven't uploaded it yet, so I'm not sure what the title is going to be, but I wanted to continue with part 2 because when I was watching back over part 1 to make sure I wanted to publish it, um, something did come to mind that I feel is very significant that I want to add. During the time that I was going through this phase with this person that I was crushing on, I was also, as I had mentioned, in the beginning stages of my spiritual awakening. And I was having a lot of metaphysical and mystical experiences. I was experiencing a vast number of synchronicities. It was too much for my mind to process, so I was just experiencing it without really trying to analyze it or explain it or define it or anything, like categorize it or anything. And it took me several years to actually look back and process it all. And I don't think I fully processed it, and that could also be one reason that it's coming back up now. Oh, major epiphany. Oh my God, major epiphany. Okay, so if I didn't fully process it back then, and it's coming up now for reassessment, for clearing, or whatever, that means I'm getting ready to be upgraded again. And the reason that I came on to do part 2 has something to do with my divine masculine. And the epiphany that I just had feels like that has something to do with him as well. Like whatever upgrade or clearing or whatever feels to me like it somehow correlates with his side of the journey. So what I came on to say is that the time that I was having this crush on this guy, there was something very significant going on in my divine masculine's life. And because of what was happening in his life, and because I was very much catapulted in 5D and having all these metaphysical and mystical experiences, what I believe was going on at that period of time was that I was beginning to merge with my divine masculine, even though it was many years before we met. I believe that we were merging because of the mental, or not the mental, but the state of consciousness that we were both in at the time. And I'm wondering if this feeling that I'm weaving in and out of timelines is because at that period of time, maybe this guy that I was crushing on, perhaps my divine masculine's energy was being projected onto him, which might explain why it felt so much like my divine masculine, but yet I'm remembering it like, no, I knew that he wasn't. I knew that we weren't meant to be together. So maybe the state of consciousness that I was in at the time was reflecting my feelings about my divine masculine, but in my human state of consciousness, I realized that it wasn't my divine masculine. I don't know if the way I explain that makes sense, but that isn't really the essential meaning or interpretation that I wanted to share. What I really wanted to share is the part that I said about the bleeding of the timelines. And that would make sense because a lot of times when I think about being in that neighborhood, I have different timelines bleeding together. because I lived in that neighborhood 3 separate times. The first time was where I lived at the time that I met this guy that I was crushing on. I moved up the street when I purchased my home, and then after I lost my vision, I was staying with a lady that was my neighbor um, when I lived there, when I had my own home there. So I actually have 3 different timelines within one block of each other. And even when I was staying with the lady when I lost my vision, I was having flashbacks of both of my residences there. The really weird thing is I was also having flashes of things that never happened when I lived there. Um, and I saw it in my mind's eye. It was like quirky things were different. Like the street sign was at a different spot than what it really was in my 3D reality. And occurrences took place in my mind that never really happened in my 3D reality. So, yeah, I think it's some kind of a vortex or portal there. And it was like maybe a catch all for everything in my potential reality that really didn't unfold in my 3D reality. And I want to tell you something else really weird that happened too. I never liked the name of the street, it was weird to me. And when I met my divine masculine, of course, he's multilingual. And I wanted to find out if maybe the um, the phonic sound of the street name had any correlation with his native language. And so I don't remember which way I did it. I remember what I did. I put in the name of my street to get the pronunciation that he would say in his language. And it was similar to the way he says my name. I think that's how it was. I think it sounded similar to how he would say my name. Or something along those lines. It was something like that. Something really weird and quirky. So, yeah, after I watched part 1, I was like, I've got to come back and really talk about, really get into the nuts and bolts of the fact that I believe there's a correlation between this guy that I'm talking about and my divine masculine. I'm not saying that I think there's a connection between them, like there could be, like they're soul fragments, or, you know, this guy that I crushed on, I don't know his native origin, but maybe, he descended from the same culture or bloodline or whatever, I don't know. But what I do know is that the energy, and I can almost, as I'm really meditating on this, I can almost say with certainty that my divine masculine's energy was very present with me during that whole period of my life. And as I think back, it makes perfect sense. Because the state of consciousness he was in at the time would very much facilitate his ability to astral travel and be with me energetically. And everything that happened to me during that phase of my life would support that possibility. The out of this world mystical experiences. I was behaving in ways that weren't typical of my personality. I went through my spiritual awakening. I had things just, material objects just like fall into my lap that, looking back in hindsight, they were very symbolic of my connection with him. Like, I did a video, I think it was sometime last year, called The Pendant. And I never finished that. I was doing that story in like 3 or 4 parts. And I never finished it. And maybe it's time that I do. Um, because that would fit in so well with what I'm talking about right now. And so material objects would just fall, like, almost literally out of the sky. And they would have meaning, and the timelines all bleeding together. And so much other stuff that it would just, like, I'd be on here all day telling you about all of the different things that were taking place. Like, another thing, that it just popped in my mind, and it's not going to seem very relevant, but it is for me, and I'll tell you why. Um, it was something that I noticed and told this same coworker about that I just mentioned in part one. Um, when I first started my awakening, I was still married, and I wasn't as heavy as I am now, but I was heavy. And my wedding rings were pretty tight on my finger. And I told her one day, when I lose enough weight to just easily slip my ring off my finger, I'll know it's time to leave the marriage. And I wasn't really trying. This is another phenomenon that was going on. I wasn't really trying to lose weight. And everybody was like, Crystal, how are you losing so much weight? How are you doing this? It's like just melting off of you. I'm like, I'm not doing anything. And nobody believed me. They all thought I was crazy. And I'm like, no, I'm not really doing anything. I mean, yeah, I'm doing normal stuff. Like, I might be moderating my intake of soda, or, maybe I'm doing a little bit more physical activity, but nothing so much that would facilitate me losing this much weight this fast. It was just melting off of me. And funnily, just the same way that I knew intuitively that my ring would just eventually slip off my finger, which, by the way, when it did come off, it was time for me to leave. My husband was starting to get very restless about whatever it was that was going on with me. Um, this is kind of straying off the subject a little bit, but when I started my awakening, I could no longer be intimate with him. I saw him in a whole different light. I knew he wasn't the one I was meant to be with, and it was like I went from, you know, feeling like I loved and adored him to suddenly like he was a stranger that I'm in bed with. And, I needed him to be patient with me, and I needed him to be understanding, but he wasn't able to. And that was his journey, and that's okay. There's no judgment there. At the time, I was very judgmental about it, but looking back, I'm not, because I'm thankful because it all worked out the way it was meant to. But going back to what I was saying, it was like I knew that when the ring came off, it would be time to go. And by that time, he was very judging of me. He was like, why are you losing so much weight? And what are you doing? And, this doesn't have to do with me. What is this about? And in a way, we kind of had an understanding of what it was, but it wasn't like, I wasn't cheating on him. It was just part of my journey. It was just all part of my journey. So, conversely, um, just as the ring had slipped off my finger, recently I've had periods of time where I could feel a ring on my finger. And I don't know what kind of ring it was that I was supposed to be feeling. I mean, I've worn other rings on my ring finger since my separation with my ex-husband. Um, rings that I just bought or had for my own, not nothing that it was given to me as a gift or anything. But I don't know, just every once in a while, it's like a phantom ring there on my finger, and I just wonder what that means. So that's just one of those other strange phenomena that I've experienced along my journey. And the more that I ramble about it and the more I think about it, it is significantly tied into my divine masculine. I just know. I don't know how I know. I just know that it's his energy that I was feeling back then. And it's just I have this sense of knowing that I can't dispute that no matter how bizarre it sounds. And who knows, maybe in another 10 or 20 years I'll look back on this video and say, what was I thinking? What was I talking about? But I don't think so. This is very different. Unless, of course, where I'm at is where, a good assumption that it's where the collective is. And if the collective, has advanced to a new level in the next 10 or 20 years, then, you know, maybe I won't look back on what I'm saying now in a critical way. But I'm just, I'm in a really relaxed state. Feel very confident in what I'm saying. I feel very accepting and okay with what I'm saying. And I'm not going to say that I'm in a state of surrender today. I'm in a state of awe. I'm just in awe of how my whole journey has been. I mean, I'm 54 years old. Um, I don't doubt my experiences in the time that I'm having them. Yeah, I might look back over the past, like I, was talking about in part one, and like questioning what was I thinking then. But I definitely am not questioning what I'm thinking now, and I'm perfectly okay with it and feel comfortable and saying what I'm saying. But one thing I will say is what I'm saying isn't set in stone, because just like I was talking about weaving in and out of those timelines, our consciousness is becoming more and more fluid. I mean, I could be in one mood one day and be in an entirely different mood the next day. In fact, I did that today. I got up in a totally different mood than what I'm in right now after this realization about the book. So, yeah, I would love to hear your experiences. Um, I would love to know if you have any insight or objective thoughts or personal thoughts about what I'm going through. Um, and if if you're looking on this video, months or years after I've published it, and it can help you in some way to give you insight or a different perspective or a clear understanding of the spiritual and the twin flame journey, then, I hope that it will. And whenever you're watching, the day that I published it or months or years down the road, I want to thank you for watching and for following along my journey. I wish you all a very wonderful day and all the best to you on your journey as well. Take care.